Hi, my name is Madhavi, and I teach a lesson called Equality Under the Law, Sports and the Sexes in Schools. So the way I like to start off my lesson is by asking a question, which is, as people living in America, what kinds of rights and freedoms do we have? So oftentimes my students will come up with freedom of speech, freedom of the press, right to an education, right to vote, all of these wonderful examples. So then I go on to ask them, we have different laws or different rules that guide us that the government sets up or our school sets up. Can these laws do anything about these rights and freedoms? And they say no, they can't do anything about them. So then we start to think about, but how do we know what these rights and freedoms are? Can we just decide all of a sudden that we have a new right or a new freedom? So my lesson is about the Constitution. We introduce the Constitution as a way to find out what these rights and freedoms are and what laws can and can't do. So the Constitution is a set of rules that guides our government. It divides our government and says how it's going to function, and it also says what kinds of laws can and can't pass. So first we look at whose job is it to look at these laws and look at the Constitution and say if they match. So just like our police enforcement look at the laws and look at the people and say, okay, what you're doing is okay, who's our police enforcement on that higher level to say Constitution gives okay to all these laws, saying it's not doing anything to restrict our rights and freedoms? This is where our Supreme Court comes in. So the Supreme Court is the judicial branch of our government. And as always, we're going to go back to our Constitution to look at what it is they do and how they're set up. So our Constitution basically talks a lot about who the justices, once they're in office, how much they're going to be paid, how long they can stay, and what kind of cases they can take or jurisdiction. And we also know from our Constitution that our president can appoint judges to the Supreme Court and our Senate can confirm them. But what about some bigger questions? Where's their how-to manual? How did the justices of the Supreme Court know how to take the Constitution and apply it to laws having to do with the internet or the media or things that didn't even exist when the Constitution was passed and ratified? So what we're going to talk about today is a type of law called constitutional law, which is what is practiced in the Supreme Court. Constitutional law is looking at interpreting the Constitution, putting it in words of today, and applying it to topics that are relevant in our daily lives and cases that come up. By looking at constitutional law, we can also see what the extent of our government's role in society is, what things they can and can't do, shows us how big they can be or how small they can be, and what the extent of our rights are. Do I have the right to say this? Do I have the right to wear this kind of t-shirt, that kind of t-shirt? All these things that are very relevant to our personal lives. So something we look at in our class is a sample case, and it's brought to the students in a comic form. So what the case presents is a boy named Alan Ray. Alan Ray is a boy in a New York City middle school who'd like to try out for his basketball team. He tries out for the boys' basketball team and doesn't make it. Then he proceeds to try out for the girls' basketball team, but the women's team does not let him even try out. Alan is very disappointed because he would really like to play basketball for his school. So the reason his school has a boys' team and a girls' team is because of New York's Athletic Equality Act, which says that a school can have separate teams for different sexes as long as there's an equal team for both. Alan is a 6 foot 7 feet guy. He can run a 5.5 minute mile and scores 48 points per season. That was his average last season. Whereas a typical girl on the women's basketball team is 6 feet tall, runs a 6.5 minute mile, and scored an average of about 47 points per season last season. So Alan learned in school that he's equal with everyone and the Constitution says he is. And so he takes his case to the Supreme Court wanting to be able to try out for the women's basketball team. So this is a case we look at with our students and we think about first, where in the Constitution can we go to find out where to get some answers? So this is the first struggle we find because there's nowhere that talks about gender specifically, and we talk about During the time of the Constitution, were men and women considered equal? Not at all. And then we go to our equality clause of the 14th Amendment, saying that all citizens must have equal protection. But then we look at different parts of the 14th Amendment that say government must respect all privileges and immunities of citizens. And we think, what are privileges and immunities? What do those words mean? What's a privilege and what's not? Or that government cannot deprive life, liberty, or property. But how do we know what those are? Would my hairdryer be included in my life, liberty, and property? Would that be protected? So then we go on to look at Allen's case, and we think about where in the Constitution could he go to, what kind of interpretation of the 14th Amendment would support him or go against him. And we start to look at, based on what kind of decision was made, what kind of precedent would be set. So what kind of ruling would be made that would set a rule for future gender cases or other courts when they decide cases at the state level or the district level. And then we think about, if we say one thing or the other, does it mean boys and girls are completely equal? And if they say yes, does that mean a girl can go into a boys' bathroom? Can a school be allowed to tell you what to do just based on your gender? So these are hard questions that we look at, that this case brings up, and we look to the Constitution, and students have a great time trying to figure out where in the Constitution we can go to and where does it provide meaning for a case in today's world. Thank you.